This is Garis, Masculist, MGTOW flyers, that is 2-3 page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is flyer number 308, entitled "When Men Get Their Sexbots and Artwombs, they will become much ruder to women." Description: once men have their sexbots, that's sex robots, and artwombs, that's artificial wombs, and are armed with masculist ideas and rhetoric, they will become much ruder to women, utterly rejecting the pretense of the feminazis that women are men's equals, and will put women in their inferior place that women have had for millions of years. Fire itself. Visual expansion. When men get their sexbots and artwombs, they will become much ruder to women. By Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. The sexbots, that's sex robots, are starting to appear on the market now, with their luscious curves, film star faces, creamy, grippy vaginas that the majority of women cannot compete with. Off the bat, in Western countries, 2/3 of women are either fat or worse, obese, and hence sexually repulsive to men. So men will easily prefer their sexbots to women. Until now, throughout history, men have had to tolerate women's alien minds, whom the Masculists label as feminalians, because men have wanted to fuck them, and men also needed women to grow the next generation, so that the tribe did not die off. Women's two traditional monopolies of womb and vagina have ensured that men have had to be at least tolerably nice to women, otherwise they got no sex from women and could not reproduce. Women were able to exercise their monopoly power of possession of wombs and vaginas over men, to force men to be nice to them and to take care of them. Women grow up expecting this behaviour of men and label men who aren't, quote, "You're not a gentleman." But all this is about to change, because women in the next decade or two are about to lose their two traditional monopolies. That is, men will be able to grow their own kids and will prefer to sex their bots due to male engineering genii inventing the artwomb, artificial womb, and the sexbot, sex robot. The sexbots are starting to appear on the market now, and Japanese scientists have already grown a goat in an artwomb, so human babies can't be far off. The creation of these two technologies will have a revolutionary and devastating effect on women, causing their status in society to plummet, and that men will treat women with far less respect than they get today. Women are feminalians to men. Women have 10% smaller brains than men, a 10% lower IQ variance than men, in parentheses, so that the morons and the genii are males. So it's not surprising that men have won 99% of the science Nobel Prizes, since the genii are males. Close brackets. Women have an average IQ of 4 IQ points lower than the average male IQ. Much lower testosterone levels than men, so are less aggressive, less ambitious, less dogged, less persistent at finishing difficult tasks, so achieve far less than men, hence have much lower status in society than men. This has always been the case, which is why in all cultures, boy babies are more valued than girl babies, because all cultures know from long experience that a boy baby is much more likely to grow up to be a highly productive and valuable member of a culture than a girl baby, who will become just another baby factory and child raiser, which, although vital, is not status worthy, because any woman can, quote, fucking raise kids. Women's alien natures get on men's nerves. Women are much more emotional, irrational, hysterical, always taking things personally, with much lower horizons, being more homebodies, less abstract, less curious, etc. Men would much rather have an intellectual conversation with another man because they know that women lack creativity. Women's opinions are usually not original and merely copy the original opinions of men. Women are not known for their intellectual contributions to humanity. Women have won a pathetic 1% of the Science Nobel Prizes and virtually none of the major math prizes. The female contribution to world intellect is negligible. For all these reasons, men, justifiably, look down on women as an inferior species, a species until now to be tolerated and humoured because of women's two traditional monopolies of vagina and womb. The natural inclination of men towards women would, if not constrained by the above two traditional monopolies of women, be condescending, more intolerant, more dismissive, more contemptuous of women than it is today. But because men are powerfully driven to get their penises inside women, men are forced to pretend to like women, to respect women. Otherwise, quote, they will not get their dick wet. Women's two traditional monopolies of vagina and womb are not the only factors that have helped women to hold their own against genetically determined superiority of men over women. The other factor is feminism, which over the past half century in its second and third wave versions has preached to women that, quote, women are the equal of men, that anything a man can do, a woman can do. Therefore, women deserve to be treated by society, that is by men, with respect. I notice when I'm travelling in Melbourne's trams, that's in Australia, that the young women who sit opposite me have an unconscious arrogance, a feminazi princess mentality that I find a sick joke as a masculist scientist. These young women have been taught by feminism that they have every right to feel their place in the sun because a woman is as good and as worthy as a man. Now, as a masculist scientist, this attitude of these young princesses is just assignment, fairy, feminazi, PC bullshit to me. The scientist in me is particularly annoyed by the intellectual dishonesty of the PC, that's politically correct, element in this attitude of theirs. I know from my science that women are not the equal of men. The most damning fact to prick the feminazi arrogance of these young princesses is that, quote, women have 10% smaller brains than men, so cannot pretend to be men's equals. Implicit in their feminazi princess mentality, their princess arrogance, is a condescending attitude towards men. I notice their haughtiness regarding men, their feeling of superiority over men, their I'm a young woman in the sexual prime of my life. I can have any man I want. I'm slim, beautiful, curvy, luscious, so any man will give me what I want. Men drool over me. I'm a goddess. I feel like a goddess. I know I'm a goddess, and my physiognomy shows it. I radiate female goddess superiority. Unfortunately for her, being too young to know from first-hand experience, her good looks will fade. And to such a point, by the time she's 40, she will have so lost the good looks she had in her sexual prime that she will have become invisible to men. So she'll be forced to see herself as sexually past it in men's eyes. As a male, as a masculist scientist and futurist, I scoff at the unjustified feminazi princess arrogance of these nubile young women, especially the especially pretty ones, and anticipate their fall when two things happen. One is the rise of the sexbots and the artwombs, and the other is the spread of masculist ideas, which probably within a decade, most men will have become infected by the masculist virus, and hence will have the intellectual, the ideological tools to be able to prick the unjustified arrogance of the feminazis, of women in general. For most of history, women have been considered by men to be second-class members of the culture, merely tolerated by men because women controlled access to their vaginas and grew the next generation. But we stand at the threshold of a major revolution in the form of the Sexbots and Artwombs. Within a decade or two, it's likely that women will revert to their old status of being second-class members of the culture, since they will have lost their two traditional monopolies, and they will be challenged in their feminazi arrogance by the sharpness and vitriol of masculist attacks on women's unjustified arrogance that cannot hold up to scientific scrutiny and is demolished by masculist science. For example, consider the negative facts about women above. So, once we live in a world with sexbots and artwombs, combined with most men being familiar with masculist ideas and attitudes, then women's status in society will plummet. Women have always been dependent on men for their survival, because they could not hunt meat due to being tied down with their prematurely born, useless infants, who demanded constant attention from their mothers. Women evolved to be prostitutes to men, to make them more effective parasites of men, better able to bribe men with sex, to persuade men to give women and their babies some of their scarce male-hunted meat, especially in times of starvation. If the man was starving, why on earth would he be motivated to give away the little food he had to some useless female? Because she had something he did not have and desperately wanted to have, that is, access to her vagina that would give him such pleasure, filling his brain with pleasure hormones upon orgasm, upon ejaculation. Thus men until now have been parasited upon by women. It's men, due to their superior brains, who have created and built whole cultures, and it's women who have parasited off them, that is, off both the men and off the cultures. Men have always felt constrained by women, forced to be nice to them, due to women's two traditional monopolies, but have always felt a certain level of intellectual dishonesty towards women, a kind of, quote, "We men only pretend to be nice to you women because what we really want is to fuck you. But as people, we tend not to take you women very seriously. You are intellectually inferior to us. With your 10% smaller brains, you invent almost nothing. You build almost nothing. You create almost nothing. In short, you women are useless and inferior." End quote. In the era of the sexbot and artworm, plus masculism, men will be much more likely to be thinking, quote, "You women are parasites on men. You don't contribute to the creation of the culture. You give us inferior sex compared to our sexbots. You expect to parasite off men as the price for you having kids, but now we can grow our own kids and not have to pay the traditional price of being a manslave to a fluffy parasite woman. You have inferior minds. You don't have original opinions, so conversing with you women is boring, so we tend pretty much to ignore you, which is why once the sexbots and artwombs came in, plus being armed with masculist ideas and rhetoric, you women lost considerable status. So it's not surprising men give you short shrift if any of you are still stupid enough to pretend that you are feminazi princesses. We men then just cut you down to size and remind you of your inferior status, your greatly inferior track record, your negligible contribution to society. We men are fed up with your feminazi delusions of female grandeur, whereas in reality you are the inferior sex and should behave and have the attitudes that are in line with that reality. And if you pretend to be otherwise, we men will just cut you down. We men are fed up with you feminazi princesses, you feminazi delusionists. We men prefer the realities and piss on your femalian pretensions of grandeur because that is all they are." End quote. In a decade or two from the time of writing, that's 2018, the above attitudes of men will probably be almost universal, and women will be treated with a much higher level of rudeness by men than is the case today. Today's women live in an historical epoch in which they still have the two traditional monopolies and an unchallenged feminism that is almost like a form of religion to women, preaching to them that they are men's equals. As women lose both their two traditional monopolies and are confronted by angry masculist scientists who will strip from women their unscientific pretensions of equality, then women's status will plunge. Feminism will disappear overnight as women claw at each other in desperate competition for men's dwindling attention, as men ignore women in huge numbers, preferring to sex their bots who do a better job of it than women and who grow their own kids. Increasingly, men will have the attitude, "Who needs women?" end quote, and will look down on them, treating them rudely when they are forced to interact with women. Cheers. Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com, and brackets. Contains links to 300 YouTube masculist essays/videos and to the book entitled Masculism, Men's Rebellion Against Being Manslaves to Women, an e-textbook of 300 plus masculist flyers for men's studies courses.